about these sorts of things. And I actually, that was part of my goal, to come at this from a person with lesser experience and to present an, I guess, opportunity and an idea that people in this meetup do somewhat of a, well, I don't call it a test drive, but kind of like a hack and tell-ish. Like, you see presentations here, and then you actually go incorporate some of those things into what you do, and then you come back and you say, oh, I saw that, it was great, and I'm here, and I'm going to tell the group about what I did, why I implemented what you chose to present. So that's a great idea. I hope that other people follow the idea. I think Jason's presentation today was really great, and he has a tool out there, so I hope that people say, and a few months, oh, I used it, it was great, it was as good as he said. So that's the impetus behind this.
Fantastic idea, by the way. Seriously.
That's kind of the overview. So I'm going to do, this is my overview. My goals are to just talk about a package, talk about what I saw and why I implemented it, talk about my attempt, how well it worked, and then some of the things that didn't work, the results, and then some of the caveats from the package that I used, and then my recommendations as well. So it was actually October 2014 that Ryan Corbett did topic modeling with Gensim. I like topic modeling because it's a machine learning tool that's unsupervised, so you can toss in stuff and actually get information back. The other nice thing about it that he actually spoke to was that it makes sense to real people when you see the topics. It's just like, oh, that makes sense. I don't actually have to know all of the methods behind it. I don't have to be an expert in Bayesian analysis, and yet it can still make sense to you. So, and then actually in May, Chris Adams did a report here that with OpenCV, also some unsupervised learning methods, and so that like kind of inspired me. I'm like, oh, okay, I got to get on top of that. It's been like 6 months since I've seen this presentation. I'm going to do something with it.
So you know he's going to sit here and judge you, though, right?
Of course.
Just making sure you know.
But it was, I mean, it was along similar lines, except with images, it's much harder to make sense of those features that are within them as compared to words. So also, Arusani did a project that was just, a weekend, put it together, came up here and presented it. So I was like, if he could come up here after putting together something in a weekend, I was like, I could give it a try. So, and then Robert Dempsey also in April talked about some screen scraping and some tools, and I had to do a lot of that to get my project up and going. So those were some of my inspirations, and as I go to the different meetups, I do think back to different people's presentations and say, that was great, I need to use that, here I am. Your talk, I remember, it was good, but I haven't attempted anything from it yet. So,
you need to do one of his then in Rust.
Yes. So topic modeling is, this is actually a method that is looks at text, and my data set is actually health inspection data from Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, where I went to grad school to study public policy, which is why it's a healthcare or health department data set. But when I first started looking at it, I was like, I have all these documents. I have like 25,000 of them now. And I was like, how do people actually make sense of this? And then I went to the presentation last October. I was like, this is the tool to make sense of these 25,000 documents. I didn't have 25,000 at the time, but now I do. And it's a lot to try to make sense of, particularly since people aren't going to go through 25,000 documents, but still using the method, you can get the features from them and make sense of them. So what I'd like to do is to give a recommendation after I talk about how I use the package Gensim, and it's use this package as is, kind of roll your own, which I really don't have expertise to say, or hire someone else, but there are other packages in other languages that do similar things that are also quite popular, and so those are the things, other tools you could use. You have a variety of tools that you could use. Okay, so as I said earlier, I looked at health inspection records for for restaurants from Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, and it started as a GIS project, but I was like, that's not so interesting. There are all these things like rats and roaches and blood in these inspections, and if I can do a full text search on them, it becomes a lot more interesting. So that was kind of well, I mean, when you type in blood and you get these results, and you're just like, oh, that's for like facilities that are serving food to people. The gross up factor makes it a lot more interesting. That's the data set. Some prior knowledge is actually very helpful as far as clustering methods and unsupervised learning, just the very basics. I took a class in machine learning for public policy when I was in grad school, so that helped me. But at the same time, like I said, the features that are extracted, the latent features, are intuitive to human beings, and that's the power of the methods, I believe. So also the tool, Gensim, I went through the tutorial. Tutorial was good. I got results that made sense to me from them, and I think they were results that made sense even without having a strong background in Bayesian analysis. Okay, so my corpus had 10,000 documents in it because I was only able to use a segment of the 25,000, and actually of that I used a paragraph text portion that was for the critical violations, but that's actually where the interesting stuff is. In the critical violations, that's where you see the rats and roaches and blood and unhygienic people sneezing and that sort of thing. So the rest of the documents, it's mostly labeled data, but part of using the methodology is that if you have labeled data, it needs to be worked with differently from the unstructured data, otherwise your results will be skewed. So I chose to stick with the critical violations, but like I said, that is where the more interesting stuff is. Although I'm not really going to speak to whether there were blood and rats and roaches.
You have all of our attention right now.
So, as I said, the methods, actually I can describe the method really, but I use latent delay allocation or DRFLay allocation. So it goes through the text and it extracts our topics, and the topics have terms like raw, seafood, ready, poultry, contamination for topic 1, probe thermometers, used, undercooked was topic 2, and then sink, hands, towels, soap, hand washing, inadequate. So when that topic is associated with a record, you can pretty easily know, oh, they had a problem with like their sink, or they were just not washing their hands. But it is, as I said, like those are the topics that came back from the data set, and it's like you see that and you're like, oh, this makes sense to me as a human being, and I actually don't need to know all of how the underplumbing works to make sense of it. And additionally, my background when I first started this was more how might I help a agency manager to make sense of data, because in my opinion they don't, and they should, and there are now methods that are accessible where they can actually get a sense of what's going on without just saying, oh, I have a gut feeling. So that was part of it. Yes?
Did you define these topics up front?
No, I did not. So you ask it how many topics you'd like it to give you. So I asked it for, I think it was 19 topics, and it gave me 19 topics. It does have some problems with it. I was just going to talk about that in the caveats, because 2 of the topics were pretty similar. And so it's just like, oh, actually, I probably shouldn't have 2 topics that have this much in common. But I mean, like any statistics, model specification is important. If you don't have the right model for your data, then you won't get good results. But yeah, so there were many things that I was like, oh, actually, I'm doing this and it's okay, but this could be dramatically better. So, like I said, once I got those results, and like I didn't ask it to actually give me these results, but that's what it sent back to me. And the other nice thing about it was that the county actually had codes for some of the broad topics, and sometimes, or from their point of view that were already established, sometimes there would be one topic that, or one category that they assigned to a violation, and then there would be 2 or 3 topics that the method assigned to that one violation. Other times there would be multiple violations, and there would be just one topic. So it is kind of a check on how well the agency is going about assessing what is a violation and why. Generally, they are drawing from greater public health sorts of documents and practices, but if after going through all the data, this unsupervised technique, you could say, oh, actually these are the important ones, and this other one just really doesn't matter. That's humans made that up, but it doesn't really matter if it still makes sense to humans. So those were the results, and there were several examples that I found online that were kind of did what I was thinking but better, and one of them was looking at Sarah Palin's email release from a few years ago. So a guy did some, tossed it into the method, did topic modeling, extracted some features, and you were able to kind of see the headlines. I mean, the topics were the headlines that would be attached to the emails. There were things about like her family and her children and Alaska. But I mean, whether you like it or not, it's just like, oh wow, this is reflective, and it makes sense to me even without having to dig into the more general analysis. So the caveat is, yes, some background knowledge is necessary to make it work properly. My efforts were pretty rudimentary. I used the package as it was installed, which is fine, but there are, I mean, it's a rigorous method if you have the right background. So you do need to properly make sure that your data fits the sort of model. Like I said, my actual total records had lots of labels in them, and if you don't take out the labels, then it will skew your results. And then as far as the package, Gensim was actually very straightforward to use. It was well documented. It was easy to follow the tutorial. The APIs were clear, and it followed, I think, standard Python conventions. So I'm really glad that Ryan presented on this package because it made it so that I could get some information about this data set that I had. Okay, so I recommend that people use the package. Like I said, extensive documentation, good citations for the methods as well. Also, you can plug in new methods pretty easily. They do also have documentation from some of the most, I guess they base their newest portions on some like very recent papers. So they're really up to speed on what's going on out there. And then also, although I don't think I included it in my notes at the end, the guy who wrote the package, who wrote Gensim, has a talk about some of his extensions and kind of under the hood stuff. And it's like, oh wow, this guy went through a lot of effort to use C and Fortran and to plug it into Python so that it was accessible but speedy. And that's a really good talk if you're just interested in, like, what model could I use to build a package that takes advantage of the best of Python, the underlying speed of C and the friendliness of Python. Also, a lot of lazy evaluation so that your corpus can be bigger than your memory, which can be very helpful. And then distributed computing is another thing that he has and was one of his fundamental points when he was trying to build it. But he actually does also document his process in the documents for how he built his package and some of his thought processes. So as kind of I'm going to put my philosophy in the package as well and actually describe it. I was like, that's great, because then it gives people who are just getting started and like, how do I approach this, an idea of how to go about it. So that was the basics of the presentation. And then I'm going to show, these are on the slides, I'll have them up online, but some links to other topic browsers. That's what I created. And I realized when I was kind of tidying things up, I'm like, oh, I did this, a fifth of the job of these folks. But some of these folks are genius people and amazing, but those are some good implementation. So that's the base of the talk, and then
if I can find my other. Oh no. Where's my stuff? Well, let's see. I may need to find what I lost.
I
Actually,
think Jason did
It's,
this to you.
it may be in front of me. Well, I will, here it is, okay.
Just jinxed the entire demo tonight, didn't you, Jason?
I do what I can.
You just did the whole jinx thing. You're just like, he's not even going to find
Okay,
his window.
so, this, I just, like, tossed the stuff in IPython notebook. I haven't upgraded to Jupyter yet, but it was super, super easy to walk through the Gensim package. It was, plug it in, open your, import the data, where was I? Create a dictionary, which it's create a corpus, and then plug it in the model. So it's like, 5 steps. And what you see up here in this code is actually creating it and making it so that I could create the topics. So, like I said, pretty straightforward. It took a little while to go through the tutorial just to learn some of the terms, but like I said, it's before you, and just a few lines of code to actually get it up and running. I actually, I can find my topic. So I am, I put this onto a web app, but it's pretty rudimentary because I was like creating it so I could have something to show after I actually implemented this thing in Gensim. It was very pleasant. But the model is actually generative, so each term within the model gets a weight so that it could actually create fictitious documents but that follow the model. So those are the topics for this one. And as I said, like raw food, store, cooked, seafood. Anytime you have raw seafood and a health violation, it's just like bad news. So
is that the percentage of occurrences there?
Yeah, that's the frequency with which it should show up. If you, I guess, get for the model. It's the if it was, I guess, generated over the course of the model.
Okay, so is that the frequency, like that word appears in a document, or the frequency? So if you had like the word raw appear 500 times in one document, does that skew this?
So it's across the corpus and then particular to the document, but I can't remember how to actually step through how it balances those two things out. But that is the frequency with which the I guess it is latent in the model. So that's why. So for the if you were generating one from the model, it would appear that many times, but that's across the corpus. So this is my very rudimentary D3 representation of the topics, and I realized I did not have a place where you could click through to the topics, but I can go back to actually I don't think I want probably because that was topic 11. So this was like a cooling. They had a violation with how they were cooling foods for that topic, and in the comments, let's see where am I? For critical violations, they had. That might not be it. Oh no. I have not done this correctly. Well, I was supposed to find the area where they had a cooling problem, but I have not found it.
Leave food out too long, basically, though?
Yes. So I mean that's it. But it's the actual county had like numbers that they assigned to some of the codes, but sometimes they showed up in the topic, sometimes they didn't. So it was kind of a good check. And then similarly, this one, it was just like a good point of topics. So this one was one, and we check to see for topic 10. Huh. Oh, okay. Huh. Not sure what I was expecting, but that's kind of the gist of it. Let's see if so that was like an original document. So the what is it called? Actually, getting all the data. Making all the data available and parsed into my records took a long time, and I filed a right to know request and all that sort of thing. So it was, a lot of work. But and also they gave me all the files as PDFs that I had to reparse, which was of course the policy change and then the schemas change, and so I did use the Postgres and JSON B. That was one of the things I tried out for this, which was really good because. As the schemas change, it's really hard to make sense of things. But that was kind of tossing together a lot of things I've seen here at this meetup. And so it's really more called to the people who are less experienced and who are like, if he can get up there, I can too. And that's kind of more my goal of making this presentation. This is actually one of the topic models from the guy who invented the methods, but they're online, and his are like great. And I was just like, I should have tried to follow these more closely, but my data was different and not as friendly. Most of them were using like books for their text, and so it worked out a bit better. But this was a time series one, so it fits time series data pretty well also. And then I want to say this one was just visualized it better than what I did. So there are a lot of good examples out there, but as far as lots of text and unsupervised things, these models make it work pretty well, and we're very friendly to work with. So that's my presentation. Do you guys have any questions? And like I said, this is mostly for people to be encouraged to also present, because I think you see Jason's presentation, it's like super polished, and he has all these parts to it. It's just like, if you're newer, there is space for you as well.
How long did you spend doing the analysis?
Well, the creating the topic models is pretty straightforward, because it's put it in and then get the topics out and then kind of like review them and see how they are. There are a lot of questions I would like to ask of the data set now that I have it all uploaded to real database, and but I still am like sorting out which questions I want to go at first, because like I said, there are blood and rats and roaches and that sort of thing that you can discover. But it actually, the thing that's most interesting to me is whether certain types of violations are decreasing over time, because since people don't actually often analyze the data in a way that's more than I feel like it's better, I don't think most agencies are looking to see, this type of violation is common. We go and we inspect and we say, don't do this anymore, but does it really decrease over time? And it would seem that if they were doing their jobs well, those sorts of, some types of violations should decrease over time. And so one of the nice things from having all the data parsed in a real database now is that I can ask those sorts of questions, but like I said, at the same time, it is a bit different from just the more exploratory, just making sense of this. One thing I didn't say is that you can do more predictive modeling with these tools as well, but I was more focused on getting a sense of what was happening more in general. So, thank you. And I hope some of you are encouraged to do a presentation based on some of the things you've seen here, because the presentations I saw were definitely helped me to formulate an idea and just be willing to present.
Glad you did it. Thank you.
Good. Good idea.
Spend some more time with this, and then you can go back and tell us what you really learned a little bit.
Oh, about the rats and roaches.
So who wants to go eat?
I'll have some beer.